With those announcements out of the way, the session is Point of Sale System Architecture and Security with Lucas, and I'm told to tell you it is Smith.
Thanks, it's way easier to pronounce that way.
Thank you, and enjoy the briefings.
All right, thanks a lot for coming. We've only got 25 minutes. I'm going to go ahead and target for 20 minutes to leave some time for Q&A. Let's go. So just a little bit about myself. Come from an IT background, did it for over a decade or so, got tired of fixing broken computers and made the switch over to doing product innovation and PCI type stuff, helping point of sale dealers, developers, merchants, and realizing none of them know a thing about security. Sorry, not none of them, there's about 2 that understand it. Went from there to Mandiant, where I dealt as a technical sales engineer and account executive. I was the sales guy, but I could actually talk to you guys and use big words. And saw some really crazy stuff there. I learned a lot of stuff about incident response and forensics and memory analysis and all that great stuff. And now I'm over at Access Data, where we got some great products going on. So just brief background there. So I thought to kind of set the mood here and show you the severity of the issue. I mean, we see these card data breaches in the news, but just how bad is it? So this is my hometown, Durango, Colorado. Rachel here is from Durango as well. Hi, Rachel, say hi. Pointed you out. So really, really small town. Yet we have our own issues. Sirius Texas Barbecue back in 2010, they suffered a breach, and it was in the news, and people didn't really quite understand it. They thought someone might have been skimming, but no, some hacker in Russia or wherever broke into their systems and stole a bunch of card data. And tens of thousands of dollars later, and a lot of lost customer loyalty, they still managed to recover, but it hurt. Then looking at 2011, Mama's Boy, one of my favorite Italian restaurants in Durango, because I think it's one of 2, so that makes it a pretty easy pick. They suffered a breach the very next year, and they've been open since the 80s, and they ended up going out of business 4 months later, which sucks, especially in a small town where, I mean, that's our lifeblood, is these small, medium businesses. They had other issues, but I think that was kind of one of the catalysts to set it off. And then, is anyone here familiar with the Iron Horse Classic, the bike race? Raise your hands. Got a few hands up. Great. So people come from all over the world to do this, and they decided to go ahead and allow people to register and use their credit card online, and the web developer thought they could do that securely and failed at it miserably. The site was breached. Next thing you know, there were apology letters going out to people that registered via the website because their cards were being used fraudulently and had to be reissued. Now, keep in mind, this is all in a small little town. Now, how bad is it? So I used to work at a credit card processor. At the time, in 2010, we had about 50,000 merchants, and I was dealing with merchant breach notification and coordinating the initial response, working with the PCI forensic investigators and the card brands. And I saw several dozen breaches myself, just out of that small population right there. And if you look at like the Verizon DBIR and the results from that, they say 190 plus of their cases came from breached point of sale systems. And they're only one of 23 different PCI forensic investigators. So I would venture to guess, conservatively even, that the number of businesses that are breached for card data each year is in the thousands. And just last week, actually, TrustWave and USCert, or one of the other DHS-type organizations, they released a report talking about a new family of RAM-scraping malware that they observed on 600 different systems. It's just bad, but you don't hear about the small business impact. These guys go out of business. I've been on the phone with these business owners, and they're crying because they know they're going to go out of business, and their whole family is now affected. And so I just, one of the key takeaways that I want you to take away from this is to go into your local community and help educate the right people, and we'll get into that in a bit here. So if you look at these small breaches, and don't worry, we'll get to the larger ones in a bit and make it cooler and more exciting, they're very opportunistic in nature, and I haven't seen the methodology change at all. For years, it's been the same thing. They scan the internet looking for ports that are forwarded to VNC, PC Anywhere, remote desktop. If it's an older, vulnerable version for auth bypass, they'll just break into it that way. If not, brute force password guess. Once they're in, they have admin access to the entire point of sale system, and it's trivial for them to steal the card data. Most of it's automated in nature, so they're just looking for the low-hanging fruit, and that's it. It's super simple. Why is it so easy? Why, isn't this being fixed? Well, everyone kind of points fingers at each other. The merchants don't know what they're doing. They run a restaurant. They run a retail store. I hired this guy to install this point of sale system. He takes care of it for me, right? And you go to talk to that guy, he's like, I don't know anything about security. I just know how to set up this software and make money off it. There's a few exceptions to that, but for the most part, that's how it is. And if you look at this screenshot here, that is actually the dealer that had set up and maintained those 2 restaurants that were breached in Durango. I covered their name, but there you have it. And one of the key, double-edged sword here is they advertise remote support, because when you're a business, if your point of sale system's not working, you want it to work as quickly as possible. So they'll set up that remote desktop type stuff and advertise it. So that's just rampant everywhere. Now, if we look at larger and more sophisticated incidents, and here's kind of a timeline, just as a memory refresher, these are very, very different in nature, and we're talking a completely separate group of threat actors. So the guys that are hitting small businesses are not the same guys that are hitting these larger breaches. And these are much more sophisticated in nature, similar to like Chinese APT, where they know what they're doing. They'll find an initial point of entry, they'll footprint the environment, do reconnaissance, figure out who has access to what systems. Maybe they're on a receptionist system and they start there. They figure out who has access to the card data environment. They'll get to there, they'll pivot, they'll bypass 2-factor authentication or piggyback sessions. I've even seen them do multiple hot points to get to the card data environment, siphon the data out completely undetected. They're pro. These guys are really good. And common misconception is people go, oh, well, Windows is the problem. I don't know if this is still like a thing where people bash Windows because it's cool, but these guys know Linux, AIX, Solaris. When they break into these, especially card processors or the really large merchants that are running these types of systems, they know how to get around them. They'll plant backdoors as loadable kernel modules. They'll modify web scripts to have like a passive backdoor. There's credentials involved. They can compromise that and move laterally as well. They even understand the hardware security modules that are used to protect PIN data for debit cards. So remember like the RBS WorldPay breach, how they got the PIN data? That was basically they got the API documentation for the hardware security module, programmed to it, and then just brute force guess pins to get enough pins to make clone cards and go out and cash out at a bunch of ATMs. And these guys know these systems better than a lot of the IT people that maintain them. So let's go ahead and go through like just a bit of a crash course here. You'll see this in smaller businesses, little shops where they just got a little standalone terminal. And you're not going to see many issues with these. They're not like full-blown Windows installs or anything like that. They got a dial-up connection, maybe Ethernet cable, and there's no like inbound ports that are listening, so you don't really see these things being exploited remotely. I mean, you can do physical tampering, but it's pretty uncommon. Then you have electronic cash registers. These are actually a really unique beast all to themselves. So you'll have multiple cash registers in an environment, and they'll all be connected to a hub that's not connected to anything else, and they use their own proprietary protocol to communicate with each other. And then one of the registers has a box that it uses to send out the credit card data for approval, similar to that standalone terminal situation. Relatively secure. Whereas point-of-sale systems, and I know I said Windows isn't the problem, this is more focused around small, medium businesses, where a lot of point-of-sale software is designed to run on full installs of Windows, and so they'll immediately have local admin rights, people are browsing Facebook, doing email and everything on the same system they accept credit card data from. And when you go to these systems, they have the magstripe reader attached, the pin pad, all these different peripherals for reading the card data, so that passes through that front of house system. So I'd like to go ahead and do like a little demo here of what exactly a magstripe read looks like. How many of you have seen a magstripe reader like be used? Okay, cool, so there's enough of you. The rest of you might be a little surprised at this though. So this is my real PenFed issued Visa credit card. It's got a magstripe, an EMV chip. I guess it helps if I do it the right way. There we go. That's it. That's my track data. I've already reported it lost, so don't worry. Oh, it's stupid PowerPoint. You gotta be kidding me. swap to what? Oh wait, stop the presentation in slideshow. Thank you. Whew. Anyone seeing that yet? Oh, it's not set up for, there we go. Sorry about that, they gave me a new computer. So that's it, when I swipe it through, let me go ahead and do that again. It just literally types out the card data very fast. It thinks this is a keyboard. That's why when you hear about them using keystroke recorders, that's why. They can just capture it that way. So let me go ahead and switch back to the presentation. So just to, what is going on? There we go. Okay, so just to break down what you're looking at here, again, most of these are keyboard emulation mode. The other ones run as like a USB device where you have to install drivers, but no matter what, it's still plain text, very easy to intercept. And it's all unencrypted. And really only that track 2 data at the end is needed to conduct fraud, so they can create cloned cards using that, and then change out the name on the track 1 data so that it shows their name on their card on the display, but it's using the stolen track data for the transaction. Kind of scary there. Now, looking at pin pads, these are actually very secure in nature, and I wish like all the card data accepting peripherals were like this. They actually do TDES encryption. It's a unique key per transaction. When Target was breached and they announced that the pin data was stolen, but it was encrypted and it's safe, and there was this big debate, it's absolutely safe. They don't have the keys. The keys are maintained at the other end by the credit card processor. So they could have gone through all of Target's systems, could not get the keys. All they had were encrypted pin blocks, and that's it. And these things go through very hardcore physical tampering testing to minimize the likelihood that they could be molested and changed so that someone can physically swap out components and steal card or pin data as it's entered. So now we know how to do this right, so let me go ahead and end the slideshow. I'm going to go ahead and show you an EMV card read now. There we go. Go ahead and do that. Actually, let me, it's kind of hard to, I need to enable mirroring or something and make it easier. Okay, so go ahead and hit that sale, right? Boom, sale, okay. There we go, it's now asking me insert or swipe cards. I'm gonna go ahead and insert the chip, and then I'm gonna go ahead and Alt-Tab. I'm just gonna do a memory dump using a free Microsoft tool. Let me go back over, sorry. And I'm just gonna go ahead and open this up in a hex editor really quick. Clone displays. There we go, that's a lot better. Okay, so that's the RAM dump of reading the EMV chip. I'm gonna go ahead and do a quick find. There's my name in plain text, but even more interesting is I'm gonna do a find for just the first couple digits of the card number. There is my full card number and the expiration date, April 2017, in plain text. And it also is the track 2 data that was on that EMV card. So everyone thinks these things are perfectly secure. Absolutely not true. The same RAM scrapers that are in use today can go ahead and steal this data as well. So let me go ahead and bring this back up from current slide. So to show you what we're looking at here, really that chip was designed to prevent cloning the chip itself. It wasn't designed to protect all the data that's passed through. It's a very common misconception that everything's encrypted. It also has fallback mode, so people could still do magstripe fraud on EMV-enabled terminals unless that fallback mode is disabled. And also that track equivalent data, you can see it's in the green box there on the right. and then look at the magstripe dump in Notepad from reading the magstripe, it's almost exactly the same. The only difference is those 3 digits, which is called the ICVV. Now, it's up to the card issuing banks, so in my case, PenFed, they made it different. So if someone were to steal the track data from an EMV read and make a clone magstripe card for fraud, it wouldn't work. But there are frequent cases where card issuing banks screw that up and they put the same 3 digits in there, so they could absolutely do a RAM scrape or whatever of EMV chip reads and then make clone magstripe cards to commit fraud. And even if they do it right, like in the case of my bank, they are doing it right, the card number and expiration date are still captured in plain text, which could be used for card not present fraud. There's plenty of venues that don't require the CVV2 or address verification to conduct a transaction. So let's go ahead and take a look at card data flow and common thieving locations. So the merchant card data environment is like their point of sale system. So they've got these peripherals that take the card data. Their front of house systems, their point of sale terminals, those are like in the lanes at Target or whatever, or Kmart or restaurant. You see all the different systems spread throughout the restaurant. And they will take the card data in plain text, unless it's the PIN, which is encrypted. But other than that, it's all plain text. And it'll transmit it, usually unencrypted, over their LAN to the back of house server. It's just a normal client server architecture. And then that server takes all that data, sends it back to the credit card processor encrypted, but then the processor gets it, they're handling it in plain text. When they get the PIN data, they decrypt it, so the credit card processor is a prime target for attackers to get all the data from all the merchants, including PIN data, if they're not vigilant about protecting that. And then ultimately it goes back to the appropriate thing. So in my case, it's Visa, so that transaction would go over VisaNet, and then to PenFed, my bank, they approve or decline the transaction depending on my spending habits, and then they send back that response. And so plenty of opportunities there, represented by the red lines to steal data, whether it's sniffing the peripheral communications, RAM scraping, even network sniffing, and even grabbing databases. They'll oftentimes store the card number and expiration date in the database, and it's pretty trivial to find those keys and burgle that. And then there's third parties that get involved, make the website, make the mobile application, maybe offer a third-party service. So merchants and developers, they'll get some third party involved and they're handling card data, but they have no contractual obligation to protect it and they don't know what they're doing, and then lawsuits go everywhere and it's a big nightmare. So looking at where the different ways to steal data are implemented at the different points of that card flow, at the terminals themselves, like at the, where you actually see them swiping your card through, they'll commonly do keystroke recorders or RAM scrapers. At the back of house server that communicates with all those terminals throughout the environment, they'll do a RAM scraper or network sniffer to get the card data from all of them, or again, they can steal data out of the database. And then payment processor, same type of thing, except now they can also try to go after the HSM and get the PINs for debit fraud. And then websites, usually they modify the code to, as it's processing a card, output it to a text file or something, and then continue the transaction so no one notices, and then they can steal that file. Or they grab it through alternate means, but code modification is the primary method. So just to get some practical advice here, and again, this is kind of the takeaways that I'd love for everyone to take away with, is go out into your local communities, find point-of-sale dealers that service the restaurants that you're really proud of, your local bookstores, whatever. Go to those dealers and educate them. Get them to stop using like insecure remote desktop software and make sure they're using two-factor authentication. I recommend LogMeIn just because that's what I've recommended in the past. They support two-factor authentication using a one-time PIN, but they only do email. So the trick to that is put in like your cell phone number at vtext.com or whatever that mechanism is so that it goes as a text message. So when they go to log in to service one of their merchants, they then have to enter the code from the text message. And then prevent those merchants and their employees from being able to surf the web from the same systems accepting credit cards, and ultimately try to get people to upgrade the hardware. There are solutions out there, hardware peripherals, that will encrypt the EMV chip read, magstripe read, and any manually keyed in card data before it passes its point of sale system. And if that's also supported by the payment processor, then there's no plain text card data going through the merchant environment at all. I know Mercury Payments, they support the Magtech DynaPro as an example. For larger targets, again, point-to-point encryption using these hardware readers, I would heavily invest in that if I were a large retailer or a privately owned chain. And also know your enemy. Don't underestimate them. Again, these guys are professionals. When these larger companies get breached, it's not because they massively screwed up. It's because the guys going after them are that determined and that good. And you need to understand their tactics, techniques, and procedures. Understand how they operate, the entire life cycle of the attack, so that you can go around and try to detect the attack in progress and evict the attackers before they get to the data that they're after. And then get executive support to harden systems. I know this is really tough to do, but you show like the Ponemon cost of a data breach survey or whatever, and you can actually quantify the risk that's involved if there is a breach, not to mention brand damage, and then wave it in front of the CEO's face that he could get fired for negligence because you just supplied him with all this great data. So that sums it up. Open for questions. None? One? Yes?
How about tokenization?
Tokenization. Okay, so the question is, how about tokenization? So when it comes to payment card data scope reduction, tokenization is a way where, and when merchants do credit card processing, a lot of times they have to save that card number so they can later make alterations, or you can do another purchase without re-entering it. So there's services where they will store that card number for you, encrypt it as a merchant, and return to you like a GUID or a UUID, and that you can use in its place. And if criminals steal that token, they can't use it to commit fraud. So that's also a way to reduce scope. But again, when they initially accept that credit card data, it's vulnerable to theft. So that's why those encrypting card readers combined with tokenization are really like the powerful magical pair. Yes?
Have you done any research on the Square?
Square readers?
Yeah, like the PayPal readers.
Not recently. So, I think mobile malware is kind of overhyped. That's just my own opinion. But I know initially they weren't encrypting. I'm not sure if they changed that. Check in with Mike Don. His Twitter handle is Mike D. He would know more about that than me. Anyone else? Okay. Oh, waving hand.
How big of a problem are point-of-sale systems running Windows XP patched or unpatched?
Oh, boy. Windows XP, I love you. I miss it. Windows 8 is cool. So Windows XP, what is how much of an issue is it? I would say it's only an issue if you don't have the system locked down and secured, because yeah, there's unpatched vulnerabilities, but the attacker has to get to it and exploit those vulnerabilities. So if you limit the attack surface area exposed to the internet, it's not so much an issue. But I don't trust these merchants and dealers for the most part to do that kind of stuff. So I cringe when I see XP used in restaurants and retailers. I mean, at least install Microsoft Emmet or something to prevent vulnerability exploitation. Does that answer the question? Cool. All right, well, I think that's about all the time we had for questions. If anyone else has any others, I'll be standing out there somewhere. Okay, yeah, I'll stand out there. Thank you.